Blockchance Online Live is an online live-streamed broadcast talk show about blockchain, AI, and green technology. We bring inspiring speakers and innovative thought leaders together to talk about current and future developments within these exciting new fields. Join us to learn how we can use these disruptive technologies to better aid humanity and strive for a fair, secure, humane, and positive future. Get involved in our community and share your opinions and ideas. Together, we can make a difference.
Greetings to all you good people out there and welcome to Blockchance Online Live. My name is Duncan Misfeld, I'm your host, and today we will talk about a very exciting field about ESG and SDG, so corporate responsibility and responsible and impact investment, and of course, especially how blockchain technology can help within these big challenges. So first about the show something. Blockchance Online Live is an open collaborative platform and we want you to be a part of it. So please make sure you type your questions during the show in the live chat and we will ask the best fitting ones by the end of the show. Also make sure you subscribe to our newsletter and Telegram channel so we can keep you updated. And in the middle of the show, we will also have a ticket giveaway for the Blockchance Europe 2021 worth 300 euros. And we will ask a question and the first one who gets to answer it in the Telegram channel will be the winner. So once more, today's topic is blockchain and sustainability, about ESG and SDG. So we will talk about how blockchain can impact sustainability. We will talk about greenwashing and its prevention. And we will talk about the ESG and how blockchain can help in the control of ESG-based investments. And now, let me introduce to you today's speakers. Our first speaker is Katharina Gehra. She's the founder and CEO of Immutable Insights. She's also the co-host at the podcast Block 52. And she's an expert in investment, coming originally from the traditional perspective. And now she can give us her insights from the blockchain side as well. Oh, Katharina, this is your time to say hello.
Hi, I'm glad to be on the show. Thank you for the invitation.
Nice to have you here. Thank you, Katharina. And our second speaker is Pascal Van Knife. He's the co-founder and CEO of Future of Trust, where they're consulting and building ESG-minded ventures. He's also the co-founder of Digital Technology Foundation, enabling ESG-minded companies over there. And he dedicates his work to a better world and purpose-driven economy. So he fits perfectly into today's discussion. And this is your time if you would like to say a welcome to the audience as well.
Well, first and foremost, welcome everybody who's on the channel here. And I'm very happy and delighted to talk about what blockchain ESG have in common or not in common. And I very much look forward to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Pascal. We will at first start with a negative side of blockchain. And my first question leads towards the energy consumption. So Bitcoin, as the most prominent and still dominant blockchain, consumes, according to a report of the Cambridge University, an astounding 121 terawatt hours per year. Compared to states, it ranks 30th place, absorbing more energy than the whole of Argentina. So this is certainly an issue. And talking about sustainability, energy consumption is definitely something that needs to be considered. So my first question to you guys is, why is blockchain technology so energy intensive by its inherent design? And why does it need that? So what's the benefit out of that? I don't know who would like to take on it first. Maybe whoever feels with a more secure answer here.
Okay, well, I think if I may jump in there, I think the main thing is that we should not consider the fact that blockchain and Bitcoin are the same. That sounds a little bit contradictory. Yes, Bitcoin is based on blockchain, But to make the assumption that every blockchain is Bitcoin or vice versa, I think that's where the equation goes wrong. So yes, I agree on the intensive energy consumption of Bitcoin, and in and by itself, in its nature, blockchain is resource intensive, but not necessarily all the time energy intensive. So I would disagree with that fact. I don't know what you think, Katharina, on that, but that's my vision.
Well, I think you make the first important point is that you need to differentiate between distributed ledger technology as a technology category and one of its most prominent representative, which is Bitcoin. And I think the key question here is which kind of consensus mechanism are you using? And Bitcoin is the oldest blockchain, and it's certainly the most prominent one, but it still uses, or it is using the proof of work consensus mechanism, which effectively means that everybody is running and only one person or only one miner is the winner. So there's a lot of energy that goes in, but it isn't really utilized to the best momentum, as I would argue. And if you look at the proof of stake consensus mechanism, which was also introduced with younger blockchains and now also in Ethereum 2.0, but also in Polkadot or in Cardano or in others, you will find that there are, newer, younger alternatives that are less energy intensive. And I think, as with any technology, it evolves over time. It develops better features, and certainly then the overall energy consumption goes down. There's another point, however, I would like to make, and that is something that the discussion here, from my point of view, isn't substantiated when you look at the comparison. It's easy to compare a whole network with all the minting and with all the transactions to a country. But what we never do is we never compare all the banking transactions, all the single servers, the centralized single servers that each of the banks has, that, for example, the European payment infrastructure has, all the SWIFT and all the global transaction banking has, and nobody adds these up, and nobody calculates the energy consumption of a single euro transaction when you do online banking. So I think the one calculates the whole of the network with all the transactions, and the other one just, if anything, counts the individual banks. So that's also something where we look at the alternatives. We would need to find a measure first on what the actual current status quo is in that energy consumption before we compare that and feel we can judge on Bitcoin's energy consumption in a relative manner.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder what would be the outcome of that, because the old system is in very many directions very inefficient, and of course that means energy consumption and resource consumption as well. So, but you would also agree, and this you already answered my second question, that what people combine always is blockchain and Bitcoin is only one solution, and the proof of work mechanism, which is kind of energy consumptive, is only one solution for the double spending problem in a decentralized network. So maybe you could go down a little bit more on other blockchain solutions which provide a solution to this energy problem, or the proof of work mechanism alternatives. You just mentioned proof of stake. Maybe Katharina, you want to go down on that?
Sure. So generally, I think the underlying feature of any distributed ledger technology is first that you want to come to a consensus that doesn't need a single, central party as an authority to create trust. So there will always be an element of multiple parties referring to the same set of data and trying to add new data in a way that's agreeable to everybody and secure to the standard that you would want. Now, when you do proof of work means who puts in the computing power, and that person or that node, so to speak, that miner gets rewarded. Now, in proof of stake, you say it's not the amount of computing power or the competition part of it. You actually take stakes, which are resources, the token, for example, the native token of that blockchain, that will be ETH 2.0 for Ethereum. And you invest the resources, and then there are validators that actively write new blocks. And to become a validator, you need to have a certain number of resources that it's almost like a deposit that you give to the network, and then you can become a validator, you can validate the transactions, and if you don't do a good job, you can be punished, i.e. slashed, and you can lose your resources. So there's a risk-reward balance here. But overall, the energy consumption that you're using then to run and continue the blockchain are significantly lower. There are also other consensus mechanisms, and I think there's probably a good dozen by now in different shapes and forms. But I think the point being is people have understood that that's a crucial part, and people have developed alternatives to that. And I'm pretty sure that with a higher number of transactions, also smaller transactions, we'll see new models evolving here. So I don't think that the category blockchain technology and energy consumptions are one and the same. It's very similar to a car, right? A car could have a power engine, or it could be an electric vehicle, or it could be a hydro-powered car. So it's the same category, it's a car, but then it just matters significantly what type of mechanism you use to power that car.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree fully on that point, Katharina. At the end of the day, a car, like you said, is something that propels you forward. And the same thing for blockchain, right? We confuse Bitcoin and blockchain, etc. Where, as a matter of fact, in my opinion, what you just said is we try to reach consensus based on a way of storing data that is decentralized, that is immutable, right? That's transparent and that's secure. If you take those four properties in terms of how you use data and what you want to do for data, specifically, of course, in the sustainability aspect of it, those four elements, that's what is the key. It's not the blockchain, so to speak, or the Bitcoin, but it is, okay, does my solution have those four properties in order for me to store that data, in order for me to use blockchain technology? So I think I really like that comparison of the car, because that's the true that's a very good point there, Katharina. Absolutely.
So are the other proof of whatever proof of stake or what else solutions are out there?
Consensus, I think everybody is working towards a way of finding that consensus, finding the consensus in order to create that block, in order to store that data, again, on decentralized, immutable, never changeable, transparent, so everybody can see it. A huge theme, of course, in the sustainability, and secure. That is, I think, again, I always keep to those 4 points that are important.
Yeah, and I think we can conclude that these consensus mechanisms, they don't naturally have to be energy intensive, and Bitcoin is, and that is what people often combine. But as I heard you two guys right now, it is not fair for other blockchain solutions to come to the same conclusion for them. Just one step to Bitcoin before we move forward. Do you think that the Bitcoin blockchain itself will be able to solve this energy problem, or is Bitcoin kind of stuck in that direction?
Good question. I think it has to do with the ultimate resource. So how are we generating the power, so to speak? And I think that with what we see, and obviously where we are involved in some very intriguing ways of producing energy, I think it's a discussion not on Bitcoin, but it's a discussion on how do we create energy, right? So that is in and by itself a beautiful conversation to be had, and specifically in lights of investments, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I don't think that Bitcoin by itself will solve that, but I think the future will definitely solve energy consumption in a beautiful way.
Yeah, agree.
Well,
Katharina?
maybe just to add on that and elaborate on that a little bit more, I think there are two other aspects that we not just need to generally acknowledge. I think we live in a world where data and storage of data is one of the key daily things for a big part of this population. So I think that overall we are acknowledging that even every email, every chat, every post, everything that we do is somewhere stored, and it's stored in a multiple way. And I think we are at a place where most of that data previously was stored on central servers, and they had redundancies as well. And now we come in a decentralized manner, and a bigger part of the value chain is going to the network, and a smaller part of the value chain is below the surface on each of our laptops, on each of our phones, on the big servers of the big corporations. So it's a little bit, if you look at the overall data volume that is in the world, and the question of how can we, make sure that this is more efficiently done and more sustainably done, then we need to differentiate those system logics as such. And they're centralized always is worse than decentralized. Okay, so I think even if the blockchain today and Bitcoin is what it is, and I acknowledge that that isn't the best way, not an energy efficient way as of today, but the overall technology led to something like Ethereum, leads to something as a new generation blockchains, and that eventually will lead to the token economy. And if you look at the system today, I think we all would acknowledge that the system today has significant dyssynergies and significant disadvantages when it comes to how to handle big amounts of data, and we're generating, terabytes and ultrabytes of data every day. So there is a question, what can we do about the fundamental system? Now, the second thing is, because Bitcoin minting is so competitive, and it's competitive on a global scale, you would look at the energy consumption and the category of a CO2 footprint, which eventually I think is the more relevant discussion to be had on its consequences. You would find that most energy consumption takes place in geothermal, hydropower, or other renewable energy sources that are literally almost cost-free. Now, I'm not saying they don't have an impact because they could be used somewhere else, and I acknowledge that discussion too, but on the long run, you will see that that actually drives energy efficiency and is certainly run on more CO2 neutral servers than most of the data storage capacity today. Okay, so again, I do think it's important to have that discussion, but it's important to acknowledge and understand the breadth and the impact and the scale of the discussion before we can actually come to to an overall judgment.
Perfect for me to move over to the next question, because it already points in that direction. Could you please give the audience an idea out of which use cases do you see blockchain and other DLTs improve sustainability most, and why? So maybe just what comes first into your mind will probably the biggest aspect. So let's start with that, and let's see how long we will discuss about this question, because there's many different aspects I see here. Whoever would like to start first.
Pascal, I need to jump on this. This is something that's so dear to my heart. So I just need to take this first. I'm happy for you, of course, to mention. I do think that the blockchain technology is a paradigm shift that we're seeing. And I do think that overall, it allows so many more opportunities and so many advances on sustainability that I think that's an extremely important discussion to be had, because it allows us to move from legacy systems that were still running, some okayish, some okay, and there was never the lever to actually move to a new era. And blockchain changes that. It changes it on the energy consumption, but also energy production. It changes the whole thing on how transparent and actually truthful we can be in a discussion. It allows us to run new data analytics and actually identify the true energy potential and energy saving potential that we have, as well as it allows us to work on a more global, more transparent end-to-end observation. Also, where does a piece actually come from, where it's being built, how is it being transported, who consumes it, how it's being recycled. So if we talk about circular economy and all these things, you cannot work with paper, you cannot work with fax, and you cannot work with email. But an automated documentation, an automated communication, machine-to-machine communication, all these things that are enabled by the distributed ledger technology give us a whole new set of tools to actually do something about that and actually improve the processes also from a sustainable part. So there are so many great opportunities out there, everything also from carbonized credit and tokenized energy and all these things So the opportunities are up to your own imagination, really.
Pascal, would you like to add to that, or maybe
No.
give us a little bit of a deeper insight into some of the aspects?
Yeah, no, I concur on 100%, because again, if we take the inherited properties of the blockchain, right, where we talk about transparency, right, typically a lot of things have to do with trust, transparency, and when we dive a little bit into the provenance question of it, it's the traceability. But those things all of a sudden have a new way of coming to us, and it opens up a whole new paradigm in and by itself. So again, to that point, I think, Katharina, we can shake hands in terms how near and dear this new form of technology is to us, because instead of closing a lot of things, it opens up a new way. The whole Ethereum, for example, which I call simply an executable smart contract, right? Which all of a sudden allows, without any human intervention, allows us to execute contracts, to see transparently into things that are happening, to follow things on, in the whole life cycle, and then by itself without human interaction. All these things allow for, I would say, a tremendous paradigm that we already see beginning left and right. Because 4 or 5 years ago, nobody talked about blockchain, and all of a sudden we see a lot of studies coming out. Deloitte's coming out with studies, the TRI, everybody comes out with the studies as to how blockchain has been really instrumental in efficiencies, in the ways of creating a trustless environment. So again, I think we could do a deep dive into the way we do carbon credits, etc. But I think there's a plethora of use cases out there. We've seen last year the BASF going for some interesting blockchain solutions when it came to plastic recycling. Right, you see in the textile industry, the fiber coin, which is an interesting coin that's gone for the traceability. And I think we can go for 1 hour in naming some of the interesting initiatives that are out there.
Yeah, I just always like to give the audience a little bit more of a grip about how this could actually work out. And I myself have been working in the supply chain tracking and tracing a little bit, and this actually enables the conscious consumerism in a way that we never had it before. So if a consumer can directly see by a blockchain-based database that is open to them how a product has been produced, and he can trust this data, this makes a huge difference once implemented. And as always, the technology is just here right now, and now we are in the transitions phase. I would like to also add the token incentive mechanisms. Pascal, you already had that with the carbon dioxide emissions. You could actually put this all on a blockchain-based token economic system, where somebody who saves on emissions gets a token and can exchange that for fiat or other benefits. So we have these incentive structures which are very powerful in motivating people into the right behavior. So what else do I have here? I mean, financial efficiency. Katharina also already had that in many of her comments, which is also the disintermediation, which brings us far more efficient structures. And what else do I have here? Yeah, the ESGs, of course, and this brings me forward to my next question. So maybe ESG, I will just translate that to the ones who don't actually are not familiar with that term. It is environmental, social, and corporate governance responsible investment or behavior. And maybe I would like to dig deeper into this blockchain promises for ESG-based investment. And I think you both are experts on that. So I will just hand it over to you with a question. What are the ESGs, and how does blockchain technology help in the goal to direct more capital towards sustainable investment?
Pascal, why don't we split the letters? If you don't mind, I'll take the G and maybe the S, but I'm happy for you to take the E.
Please go
If that
ahead.
works for
I
you.
was going to go because I really like, because obviously within the pitch for this show was the greenwashing, and I really wanted to dive in to the full ESG, right? Environmental and social and governance. I think these are very important. If you talk about environment, about using energy efficiently, using renewable energies, managing like the waste responsibility, and have also responsible practices and disclose information on your environmental policies. That is definitely environmental, but the social factor of it, right? How businesses treat and value people, or also the governance factor where you focus on the corporate policies and how companies are governed. These three items are yeah, extremely interesting topics, right? When you talk about the good relationship with your community, even, or diversity and inclusion. When you talk about tax strategies, corporate risk management, and so on. So again, the ESG in and by itself and as a whole is very, I'd say, very important and good subjects, because you can find use cases for each of them.
Katharina, before you continue, Pascal, maybe on this environmental part again, because in the old days it was a common understanding that investing into environmental responsible behavior makes your company less profitable. I've heard many different talks about this, stating that it is not this way anymore. Have you heard about that? Do you have an example for us where this paradigm shift is actually working towards environmentally responsible behavior being more profitable for companies?
So I think in the end, why is it becoming more profitable for many companies is because, again, it gives a paradigm shift, right? All of a sudden, the resource, energy as a resource, has become more valuable, and as such has been treated that way. And as such, a lot of innovations have come in that space, right? The innovations as to being more resourceful with energy that you have been given, etc. So I think that in and by itself, yes, in the short term, it might look like you have to spend more, but in the long term, right, you see that you gain way more. Plus, obviously, if you look at the carbon credits, if you look at how come Tesla is making so much money, that has to do obviously with the offtake of the carbon tons that are available for them. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of cases to be made to say it is the complete opposite, but it's not the opposite initially in hard numbers. If you are an impact investor or an ESG investor like Katharina probably and myself, you don't look at the short term, you look at the long term. And again, that long term thinking is becoming way more profitable in the long run, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Katharina, would you like to take on the S and G part of the ESG?
Yes, I do. And I would like to start with the G, because sometimes I think that that's a little bit overlooked, because it's governance, but it also means government, right? So I think it's the whole idea of how do we live together, what set of rules apply, and how do we enforce them. And there are a couple of things that blockchain is an absolute eye-opener to, the same way as when the Bible was first translated from Latin and ancient Greek into actual German and people could read it. So it has a significant enabling function that takes, the whole Enlightenment theory back to the people, because they're actually things that now have an option value. There's an alternative for them. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at the whole way how currencies are structured, the same way how states are structured, one of the fundamental promises was that we could live in peace and prosperity together, and each of us could, have the individual freedoms, and then there would be a common better good. Now, if you take a little bit of a fresh look at that, you could actually argue, if the people who came up with those revolutionary ideas would have known about blockchain technology, they wouldn't have organized a state or a company the same way they would today. because the level of transparency and the level of clarity on what is going on and who is getting what and when is in a completely new state. We never knew before exactly what was going on. There was always a level of transparency in everything from bribery to cheating to free riding. All those economic effects and also those incentive structures have been permitted by the lack of information. Now, the blockchain literally solves the problem of lack of information because you can participate and you can share. The more things you bring as a transactional information on a blockchain, whatever type of form it is, the more you actually enable people. And that has fundamental impacts on social and on all of the governance side. And I would almost, be as bullish to say that potential is probably the most overlooked potential of all of the blockchain technology at this point. Environmental is definitely important, but the impact that can have on the broader promise and how we interact, both in an economic fashion, but also as citizens, as global citizens of this planet, as consumers, as business partners, that has a fundamental impact, and that will literally change the world.
Yeah, maybe it's overlooked because changing the governmental structures are the hardest path to take, actually. And those old structures are kind of resilient.
Sorry. I just want to clarify, I'm not libertarian, and I also, I'm not a querdenker or any of that part, but I literally just say it, it's an enlightenment phase where we can actually redefine how we live together because technology allows us so.
I mean, we're already seeing that in Estonia and other countries that are implementing it for their governmental functions. There is so much more efficiency, but also providing the people with the democratic means. I mean, we had a show here about how blockchain can help in the voting aspect also. So there are many different parts as well. I think we will move on to our break now. Before I will give you to the possibility to dig a little deeper into your own blockchain use cases and how you guys at your working spots are actually providing this responsible investment. So let's move over to our break, and please stay tuned for that, because in the middle of the break we will ask the question for the Blockchain's 2021 ticket giveaway, and it will be a one-time economy class ticket worth 300 euros. The conference is situated here in Hamburg from July 7th to July 9th, and stay tuned for that. We will directly ask the question after the short video.
Where are we heading? Who owns your data? Who owns your money? Your future. We are approaching a new dawn. Blockchain technology. Artificial intelligence. Sustainability. Be a part of the evolution. Hamburg, Germany, 2021. Blockchains, 2021.
So, especially type it in the Telegram chat. We would like to have you in the Telegram chat for this. Now here comes the question. What does ESG stand for? So this should be a fast one. I hear that currently there is no sound. I hope somebody can hear me. Oh, okay, I get it. Obviously, you can hear me. So what does ESG stand for? Who's the first one to answer that? I have a look into the chat myself. I have an answer here, and this would be inside ideas. Or am I getting this right, Konrad? Yeah. Inside Ideas has answered correctly, which is environmental, social, and corporate governance, of course. So yeah, congratulations for that. And now let's move on to the second half of our show. I hope the speakers are back here. Welcome back, Katharina and Pascal. It's been very interesting in the first half, and I'm looking forward for your answer to the next question. So, please give us a concrete use case example for a DLT solution enhancing responsible investment allocation. So, Katharina, let me first start with you. So at Immutable Insights, you're analyzing and evaluating different blockchain projects with a scientific and mathematical tool set. Which was the most impressive one regarding its potential for positive impact?
Oh, well, I think everything when it comes to token power and everything when it comes to the circular economy in terms of end-to-end transparency, I think those are just really great levers and have huge potential. I personally have an edge for carbonized tokens, similar to what Pascal has. But I think the question is, where can we do the most and where can we achieve the most? And here it certainly is important when you look at the whole power consumption and power production thing. If you look at how can we update the current systems, how can we make grids work more effectively, how can we enable the consumers, whether they're private or business, to actually make better choices, then I think the whole tokenized power thing, or let's say industry, is a big one. And on the other side, if you look at the circular economy, you've mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it's just, it makes sense also if you look at precious metals and if you look at the actual ingredients, so to speak, from any product, and you don't want to waste it, but you actually want to recycle smarter and you want to understand the residual value of it better. And you also want to make sure that companies and users bear the actual cost of it overall and not just part of the cost. Then I think the type of solutions that blockchains can provide, being smart, being easy, being cheap, and generating a wealth and pool of data where we just can ask more precise questions, can come up with a magnitude of more valid and more detailed and therefore more insightful answers, and actually can manage the problem much more effectively than we could before. So I think here data and knowledge is key. It helps also to build better solutions. It helps investors to make more data-driven decisions, which is always important because right now there's lots of talk and not as much reliable data.
Could you maybe give me a little bit more of an idea about your work at Immutable Insights? Because I'm very interested in this this whole approach you have towards evaluating different companies. So,
well, we're not a rating agency, right? So we work for individual companies who actually want to develop a token or who want to understand an impact that they're having or want to develop a token, for example. So it always depends on what angle you're looking at. But if you look, for example, at the whole idea of tokenized power, if you look at the big manufacturers of offshore energy, one of the big questions is how do you get offshore energy measured and documented and reported in an easy and sustainable way? And the question is also, how can you manage the pricing of that more effectively in order to make sure that, you know, the renewable energy sources also from an economic and financial perspective out compete other alternative sources. Now, that means if you, for example, have a hydro power generating offshore machine, then you have, let's say, a small little tag on each of the power units that you produce, and you document it from the moment they're produced through where they're stored to where they're actually then being deployed. And that gives you a whole idea about actual power flows and usability patterns and transaction losses and the economic feasibility of, you know, saving that data. So there, you really literally start to being able to look at things and analyze things that previously you couldn't, because you didn't have a data set that ran from the beginning to an end, or you needed to trust somebody to produce the data set for you. Well, if you're looking at the other side, and if you're an investor, or if you're looking at the other side and you're some kind of regulator or other third parties, you don't want to trust the data that's been produced in-house for you, because there's an inherent flaw already in that. It's like asking a drunk person, have you drunk, rather than just, you know, letting him breathe.
Yeah, thank you. So about the same question towards Pascal, but with a little introduction first. So at Future of Trust, you're consulting and accelerating businesses by implementation of blockchain solutions, right? So what is the, to you, most convincing value proposition if a company wants to become more ESG compliant?
That is, I think we would all agree, that is obviously a very tricky question, because, you know, again, when you ask what's the most compelling, that is something that is most dear and near to your heart, which in effect would be the environment and would be leveraging carbon credits and finding out tokenomics, etc. behind it. But ultimately, it is really, in terms of how I look at these solutions, is basically going back to the actual value proposition of a company and what it is that they want to achieve with blockchain, with, of course, the niche when it comes to ESG. But right, what is a company? What do they want to achieve? What is their goal? Is it something to provide trust, transparency, and traceability in the whole supply chain? Is it thinking of a new business model, right? For example, we're involved with the project that is very intriguing and is going to change the diesel industry, right? Because nobody actually till today is actually measuring the CO2 and everything that comes with diesel engines, whilst there are ways to actually do that. And all of a sudden, again, coming back to the base principles of blockchain, make that data fully applicable and make it insightful. So again, coming back to your question, I find it tricky, because ultimately we as venture builders, we help companies understand and do three things. What are the jobs you want to do with your blockchain? What are the pains that you're solving? And what are the additional gains? And across that, we try to look at blockchain from that perspective, be it provenance in the supply chain, be it even fundraising, et cetera, et cetera. So again, a tricky question. Most near and dear to my heart is really how can we look at really living in a more reducing the pollution, right? And how can we maybe even improve human life? That is very much on the social aspects of it. For example, slave trade, et cetera, et cetera. So these are things that that are near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, we already had Brian Iceland from Slave Free Trade here in one show, and that was an eye opener as well. Yeah. How they approach also via blockchain certification, so to speak, how a product is slave free, and you would wonder how many still are not slave free. So this is a very, very important issue as well. I find it very encouraging how the combination in between this kind of revolutionary blockchain, decentralization, transparency idea moves into this pure investment focused area as well, because some studies actually show that once you move your corporate governance towards a more sustainable, a more fair behavior with your workers, it actually, the whole ESG compliance makes your company also more profitable and more resilient towards catastrophic events, for example. So the risk evaluation is an important part of that as well. Do you have this risk evaluation also in your mathematic structures, Katharina?
Well, absolutely. It's actually where our heritage, where we started off from, because one of the key purpose drivers that we had when we first started is there's this whole myth that, blockchain, and again, Bitcoin is mostly used for money laundering. And that is true to a certain extent. Yes, there have been, transactions that you probably wouldn't put in the good category. But if you compare that again to the existing system, where you literally, despite all the efforts we've had and all the additional regulatory costs that you also implied, you haven't really achieved any progress on the whole anti-terrorist financing and money laundering side. Now, on the blockchain, I've been often quoted to say it's the literally dumbest idea to launder money, because you're documented forever, you're traceable forever. And a company like ours has the means and tools now to not only catch you when you're doing it right now, but we can also document and go back whenever you've done it before. So I think that is an important difference. And somebody's commenting about another whataboutism, but I think that's a fair and also an important discussion to be had, because we haven't. If you talk about slave-free products, as long as you can launder the money in the end, that's a profitable business. But the more difficult it becomes, the more crucial and the more rewarding, and again, as to your point, the more beneficial to the company's overall bottom line is when you don't do it. So the intrinsic effectiveness of policies, and particularly the enforcement of policies, will increase significantly with blockchain-based transactions. And this, of course, in the end, not only will prevent the bad behavior in the first place, but also disenable everything else that was done in the first place to, for example, launder money afterwards.
Yeah, I totally agree. So maybe it's a good point to move over to the greenwashing, because this is how companies try to actually get a green vest without being in totally a green company. So they point out certain small aspects of their behavior, invest some money in there, do some PR with it, and all of a sudden a huge company that wastes a lot of resources on the path looks like it is green, but in per definition it is not. So the question is, there's a growing problem with greenwashing. So corporates, I already had that, sorry. Can blockchain be a game changer in this? And if so, how do we get there? So who would like to take on that?
Well, I think to your point, a lot of times the whole greenwashing in and by itself, you could look at it from two different sides, right? Yes, it's been used as a almost as an excuse, right? In today's world where greenwashing, companies, they only show certain numbers, etc. But what I see, and I think I would align very much with where we see a little bit of a change, and that's also the change in consumerism, right? People are nowadays, the fact that it's even mentioned here is already so because there is an awareness, right? That there's a lot of, pardon my French, BS going on in that whole greenwashing, and people will call for more of that transparency, and they also will call for more data provisioning along the way, and how that relates to other forms within their business. So again, hence I would say it is a little bit, the positive side of that is that some of those big companies are dipping their toes in what it means to be transparent, and they're dipping their toes in what it means to create somewhat of a trustless environment. And I would say we need to capture those bigger companies, because once they're in, and that's totally what Katharina said, once they're in that mindset and that thinking, all of a sudden nothing that they do will be hidden anymore. It will be there on the blockchain. It is indeed the stupidest way to launder money, but it is indeed the craziest way to store your data on that blockchain and be transparent. So I like to give a little bit of a of a twist on that greenwashing. On the other side, obviously, it is an issue. It's a tremendous issue in the industry, and I hope again that there be more and more force from us as business people in the world, and really looking at more key performance indicators, right, for companies, other than that small piece of what they have actually changed, whereas on the back end they have changed nothing. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of peer group pressure, right? Because once some of the big corporates start to actually go transparent and go ESG compliant, it will be very, very hard for the others to just maintain their current ways of not being responsible. So I think as you said, once we catch a few ones, and for example, I've just listened to a podcast where Unilever was mentioned, where there's a lot of spending into their sustainable department. So I think there is pretty good developments in the big corporate sphere as well. Katharina, would you like to take on the greenwashing aspect as well?
Yeah, I would like to share just a practical example from also our work, and how the whole discussion actually goes to another edge, and that is greenwashing in itself. Obviously, is also a term that spurs emotions. And I think one of our jobs is that we bring data to the table and we let the judgment in front of the door. So one of the things is actually the discussion. Oftentimes, the more data you have and the more cohesive a data set is, discussions become more trade-offs, and the actual quality of the discussion and the actual truthfulness of the discussion becomes much more interesting and also apparent. Now, the question is, what do you actually want to achieve and what do you expect somebody to do? Because green in itself is also just a logo. It's just a statement. So the question, what do you actually want to do? Do you want to be CO2 neutral? Do you want to be more energy efficient? Do you want, so all these actual questions, once you have the data, also the management and the company in itself and the people working there can actually have a better discussion about what they actually want. What are the biggest levers? Do you want to have quick wins, and do you want to achieve something within 6 months? Or do you want to restructure your company based on just new KPIs, for example, taking energy consumption again? So I think the whole important part is that not only does it prevent greenwashing at its most naive level, so you just say one thing and you do the other, but it actually enables the structures in itself to have a more informed and more in-depth discussion and gain clarity on what is actually happening, what are actually the drivers of not being green, and on the other side, what does it mean to be green, and how do we get there in the most effective way?
Yeah. So quick there, just to touch upon the importance, not necessarily on greenwashing, but in our industry overall. If we look at, again, the companies that are incorporating ESG standards over the past, or at least last year, they seem to have outperformed even the S&P 500. So again, that paradigm shift, that thinking on ESG is definitely a great one to have. And greenwashing, again, maybe I'm too much of a have too much of a positive outlook on the world. That could be it. But I would change the discussion. Yes, the awareness, that discussion. Let's encourage that, right? And let's go for it. That would be my definitely my take on it.
What would you say if I quoted that some of the business models currently running are inherently not able to become totally responsible or sustainable? Do you think that for each aspect of our current economy, there will be these best practice examples moving forward and actually forcing the other ones to also go for blockchain solutions? Or do you see like a split in the economy happening where the mass consumption is still happening in the old ways and unsustainable, resource devastating? Or how do you see this working out in the future?
Yeah, I see there's much discussion right now into the standardization of ESG, for sure. And that discussion, obviously, if you take on European level, where I think it's the European Federation for financial analysis and societies, etc., where they have come out with GPIs, where you see the GRI coming out with I would say with the standards in that. And I think that we are slowly in a transition stage and phase where a lot of the metrics and a lot of the data, etc., needs to be defined as to what when is a company, you ask me, when is a company fully ESG compliant, or what are the standards for that? And that is a broader discussion to be had, and that is a broader discussion that I think my fellow panelists and we would agree on, where blockchain is going to be almost like inherent. It needs to be there. The discussion on blockchain needs to be there inherently, because that is a way of proving that all those data sets that we're trying to aggregate and all the standards that we're setting, that they're actually being utilized, and that people are upholding to those standards without what you see a lot today, and is trying to mess around with the books, etc. But that is definitely things that are about to change.
Katharina, would you like to add on that? So how do you see this playing out? How do you see this playing out? Sorry.
No. I'm just saying I wanted to make an authentic point rather than just saying I agree with what Pascal said, because that never, is enticing for the audience. In general, I think I would share the positive outlook, and I think if we look at just other more recent also pandemic-driven incidents, I do think we come to a point in history where you have two things coming together, which enforces my positive outlook. One is the current system just doesn't seem to work anymore, not in the way that we were used to, right? And we've come to a point where there's been a pause long enough for people to actually take a step back and reconsider. And on the other side, we have the urgent big challenges. It is climate change. It is the whole data economy. It is the whole thing. How are we more fair and inclusive? And how do we tackle the whole ESG thing and do it properly, not just like another marketing campaign? And so in the end, I'm a firm believer that it is important that we have lots of data. It's important that we have reliable data, as in it can't be manipulated by the author who has an intrinsic interest in manipulating it. And also making sure that we use the scientific tools that we have, and we use science most probably to make better decisions. And all that will add to, no matter what regard of aspect you look at, it will be always better in that regard.
I always like the positive outlook, actually. It makes me feel much more happy and much more giving a reason why we are sitting here and spreading this message in the internet. We are already moving towards the end. Actually, it's already 6 p.m. But I would like to ask once again, before I come to my final question, if you have any questions, please type them now in Telegram, so we can still find a few minutes for the audience questions. We had a few ones in between, but we need them in Telegram now. So please move over there. My last question to you guys is always the same, actually, to every participant we have here, because I find it very interesting to hear what actually kind of a demand, a personal wish you would like to have towards governments, corporates, or maybe to the public to turn the ship in the right direction. So let's not talk about what kind of issues we currently have. We already had that in the show. But what would be your demand, your wish towards whatever participant you would like to choose?
Pascal, you go first.
That's a good one. I think my wish evolves around the the base principles of blockchain, right? Blockchain being decentralized, being immutable, being transparent, and being secure. And when I touch upon the level of transparency, that issue, I would really want to see an adaptation of that transparency, number one, and then the second one on top of that would be the application of data. So I see too much lying with statistics in today's world. That really upholds me on many levels. And I hope and I trust that blockchain obviously will add to that transparency, full on data sets that I can look on from different angles instead of being told by one party or one government or one media outlet how to interpret that data. Because again, that seems to be that translation and that transition, right? I would say my wish would be in that translation and in that transition that the true heroes, so to speak, will stand up and come up with beautiful solutions that allow for people to view at it from a different prism, etc. Because in the end of the day, that's what it is all about. We need to be way more informed, and we are gradually getting all those tools and how to make that applicable. I hope it didn't take too long for that answer, but that would be my
No. It's an important one, and I totally agree with you on that one. Yeah. So Katharina, here's your wish to which participant would you go for? The government or for the corporates, the public?
You caught me off guard in a sense. I don't wish for anything. I'm usually wanting to do it on my own. And I think when I left my private equity career, almost 3 years ago now, I've made a deliberate decision because I believe in the technology and I believe in its potential. I love the opportunity to be actually shaping an industry rather than just inheriting a system. I love to challenge the status quo. And I think wherever I can and wherever I am, I'm trying to promote blockchain. There's actually a running joke with my husband now that the solution for everything is blockchain. And as a matter of fact, I think it's true. So I really do think that it's on all of us to, do their homework, read, learn, understand, apply the knowledge, and see where the solutions are. I think really it's an unimaginable pool of opportunities, and it can create so much good in this world. And it's something that gives me so much power and energy and hope, and it drives me and it makes me excited, and I can't even stop. So I don't think I don't expect it from anybody else than my own, and I'm just trying to contribute as much as I can.
So this was maybe putting some. No, it's not putting pressure. It's giving just a good example on how to actually follow with your own behavior what kind of possibilities are out there. So I think there's a lot of good things we can do, and if everybody looks at its own doorstep, that will probably have the biggest impact that you could wish for.
It is lead by example, so absolutely, I love that.
So I see that we already had a question being written here on my third screen. Actually, I'm looking at, but it looks like we're too far in the overtime right now. So we will answer the user questions in the Telegram channel. There's been a few ones, so sorry for not asking them here on the show. We will plan in a little bit more of a time for the next time. This is always my failure as a moderator, so blame on me. We will move on to the end of the show by now, and I'm really thankful for my two participants here, Katharina Gehra and Pascal Van Knife. I hope I pronounce it correctly. It's been a pleasure. It's been very interesting with you guys here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's nothing left for me but to point out that look at our YouTube channel afterwards. This show will be posted there as well, so you can share it to whoever you think it will be interested in. And yes, stay tuned for the discussion in Telegram. As I said, your questions will be answered in there directly after the show. And also for the Telegram channel, please ask us your questions and the topics you would like to hear, and maybe some suggestions who we should invite to our show. We are interested in all of that, and we are really taking it into account because, as we already said, this is a collaborative open platform, and we need you to be a part of it. So the next Blockchains Online live show will be with the president of Silica, Dr. Amrit Kumar. It will be about the next generation of blockchains, faster than a Lambo, how to scale a blockchain. So this is a little bit deeper into the technology, but it is definitely an interesting one, and it tackles one of the biggest problems of blockchains, of the first blockchains. So this is it from my side. I hope you've taken some interesting insights for yourself out of this. And for me, there's nothing left to say but goodbye and long live the blockchain.